quadratic formula is considered a last resort, partly because it always works, and partly because on a lot of equations, the other two methods that we have looked at, one of the other two methods might be a much quicker and easier method to use to solve that particular equation. However, different people have different preferences, and some will resort to the quadratic formula earlier than others in selecting a method for solving an equation. The first step is to get all the terms on one side so that we have 0 on the other side. Then we can identify A, B, and C, and we plug them into this formula. The advantages to this are that it is one formula that once we've memorized it should work for any quadratic equation. The disadvantage to this method is that the formula itself is not a very simple formula. So it might take a fair amount of work to massage our answer into the form that we want. First thing we're going to do here is identify A, B, and C. We can see that the terms are already all on one side. We have 0 on the other side, so I have A equals 4, B equals -4, and C equals 11. I'm going to plug these all into the formula, trying not to simplify anything as I go. In this very first step, I just want to plug into the literal formula that I have. Since that first term is minus b, I always end up with the opposite of whatever sign b has in that first term by the time I'm done simplifying. B squared minus 4ac goes inside the radical, and 2a, or 2 times 4, ends up in the denominator. Now I'm going to simplify inside the radical first. But of course there's no harm in going ahead and doing this sign simplification here in this step as well. Because I have 2 minus signs here, I'm multiplying 3 numbers together, one of which is negative. That's going to make this number negative. But then when I subtract it, these 2 minuses together are going to give me a plus sign in the middle. We do want to be cautious about that sign as we go. So that's going to become positive 4 plus or minus the square root of -4 quantity squared becomes positive 16. That b squared term always becomes positive. And 4 times 4 times 11, that's going to be 16 times 11. I might bring in my calculator for that. I get 176 for that term. And this is all divided by 8. 16 plus 176 is going to be 192. And from here, you'll find that depending on the kind of solution that you have, your steps may feel fairly different. We're going to look at 192 to see whether it's a perfect square, and I could do that just using my calculator. I can see that no, in fact, that is irrational. So instead I want to start looking for perfect square factors. And I'm going to focus on simplifying the square root of 192 and come back to my formula here with the simplified form of that. After trying several perfect squares or finding the prime factorization of 192, you may find that the factorization 16 times 13, sorry, that breakdown wasn't correct, 64 times 3 is what I find after finding the prime factorization of 192. 2 to the 6th is a perfect square factor because 6 is an even power, so 64 is my perfect square, and 3 is my remainder. That means I'm going to write the square root of 192 as 8 times the square root of 3. So I'm going to come back now to my expression from the quadratic formula and write this as 4 plus or minus 8 times the square root of 3 over 8. Now at this stage we want to simplify the whole expression And I find the easiest way to do that is just to break it apart as two separate ratios, each over the denominator 8, and reduce them one at a time. So this first one, 4 over 8, of course, simplifies to 1/2, taking out the factor of 4. And this second one, 8 times the square root of 3 over 8, the 8's cancel out, leaving us just the square root of 3. So this is going to be 1/2 plus or minus the square root of 3. It would also be fine to have this in the form 1 plus or minus 2 times the square root of 3 over 2 if you had simplified it by a different method and maybe factored 4 out of the numerator to cancel it instead of breaking it apart into two separate ratios. So both of these forms for the final answer are acceptable. As a final step, if we wanted to write this in roster notation, if my math lab were asking us, for example, for comma-separated values, we would have to break apart that plus or minus symbol and make it into two separate answers that look like this.